Beyond the dust of the ages, at the crossroads between myth and reality, lies the story of a civilization that mastered the desert's mysteries and made the Nile River the axis of its world. The ancient Egyptians, a mighty power arising from sand and stone, left behind towering pyramids, imposing temples, and a cultural legacy that still reverberates through the pages of history. This documentary is an initiatory journey into the heart of the most fascinating civilization on Earth, a realm where deities and mortals coexisted in a sacred symphony, and each grain of sand spoke of imperial ambitions and tireless spiritual quests. Imagine a golden light emanating from the sun as it rises beyond the desert horizon, bathing imposing stone temples and dispelling the night shadows along the banks of the Nile. In the distance, one glimpses the grand silhouette of the pyramids, while a gentle breeze carries the distant sounds of boats laden with grain, spices, and precious goods, coming and going from this cradle of ancient commerce. In the background, an ancestral murmur seems to echo among columns and hieroglyphic inscriptions, proclaiming that here, in the heart of Egypt, the very epic of humanity unfolds. Today, we regard these impressive monuments with a mix of wonder and respect. We ask ourselves how a people, beginning in the harsh conditions of a vast desert, managed to construct structures that defy time, to create astonishing works of art, and to develop a belief system so rich and complex that it has inspired entire generations of historians, philosophers, and scientists. Together, we shall venture through the unknown caverns of history, listen to the echo of secrets whispered in temple corridors, and experience the great adventure of ancient Egypt, from its founding moment to its spectacular decline. The emergence of Egyptian civilization was closely tied to the great Nile River. Before the first cities arose from the fertile riverbanks, nomadic communities gradually gathered into stable settlements, drawn by the possibility of large-scale agriculture. The Nile provided irrigation water, abundant fish, and a safe haven from the unforgiving desert nearby. Thus, starting in the 5th millennium before Christ, on the territory that would become Egypt, prosperous settlements began taking root. Historians divide Egyptian history into several defining periods: the pre-dynastic period, the Old Kingdom, the First Intermediate Period, the Middle Kingdom, the Second Intermediate Period, the New Kingdom, the Late Periods, and finally, the time when Egypt fell under the dominion of other powers such as the Persians, the Macedonians, and the Romans. If we look at the earliest forms of political unification, it is believed that around 3,200 years before Christ, a ruler known as Nama or Menes unified Upper and Lower Egypt, founding the first dynasty and, with it, one of the earliest centralized states in history. Egyptian society was highly stratified, with the pharaoh considered not only the supreme monarch, but also an embodiment of divinity on earth. Below him in rank were nobles, priests, and high officials, those who oversaw grand construction projects, administered harvests, and handled the people's religious concerns. Craftsmen, soldiers, merchants, and scribes made up another important layer, since their skills ensured both material welfare and the transmission of written knowledge. At the base were peasants and laborers who, though leading hard lives, nonetheless provided the agricultural and economic infrastructure of the civilization through their work. The importance of religion in ancient Egyptian life was indisputable. Priests constituted an elite in themselves and played a crucial role in maintaining cosmic balance, known to the Egyptians as Ma'at, a concept embodying order, justice, and universal harmony. A temple was not merely a place of worship, but also an economic and administrative center, managing vast tracts of farmland, vineyards, and specialized craftsmen who worked in service of the gods. All these aspects show that ancient Egypt was a complex civilization with a remarkable capacity for cooperation and for developing long-lasting institutions. Beyond social structure, ancient Egypt raised monumental temples and created an especially sophisticated written language, hieroglyphs. These sacred signs chiseled into stone were not mere symbols, but a bridge between the material and the divine. Furthermore, through funerary art and elaborate mummification practices, the ancient Egyptians expressed a clear concern for the afterlife, considered a continuation of earthly existence under the protection of the gods. Each epoch of ancient Egypt was marked by remarkable figures who left their imprint on history. The first unification under Menes opened the path for subsequent dynasties, but names like Djoser, Khufu, also known as Cheops, Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, and Ramses II remain in collective memory as symbols of absolute pharaonic power. The pharaoh, as sovereign, enjoyed sacred prestige and was regarded as a son of the god Ra, or in certain periods, a terrestrial incarnation of different protective deities. His fundamental mission was the maintenance of cosmic order, and every aspect of governance, from legislation to great construction projects, was subsumed under this divine duty. In eras of flourishing, the pharaohs had enormous resources to erect temples for the gods and their own sumptuous tombs, believing they were thus preparing their path to eternity. The Old Kingdom, famous for the construction of the pyramids at Giza, reached a pinnacle of funerary architecture during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. His pyramid, known today as the Great Pyramid, is considered one of the grandest structures ever created by humanity. The engineering mastery of the ancient Egyptians continues to amaze experts and laypeople alike. Enormous stone blocks weighing tens of tons were cut, transported, and placed with remarkable precision, all without the aid of modern technology. Later, in the New Kingdom, pharaohs such as Hatshepsut, the first great queen pharaoh who fully assumed the masculine title and symbolism of kingship, or Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, extended Egypt's political and military power. They consolidated borders, waged successful wars against neighbors, and erected impressive monuments to honor their glory. Supported by loyal armies and a sophisticated administration, such rulers guided Egypt to a stability that lasted for centuries on end. Wherever one looks in ancient Egypt, architecture and art exude an aura of sacredness and magnificence. The pyramids are, of course, the most famous symbols, but the kings of Egypt also raised enormous temples whose massive columns are encrusted with hieroglyphs and ritual scenes. From the Temple of Amun-Ra in Karnak, which spans many hectares and contains hypostyle halls, obelisks, and chapels, to the funerary temple of Queen Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, perfectly integrated into a limestone cliff, every structure reflects the architectural genius of the Egyptians. Picture the scene. Hundreds of workers and craftsmen, clad in characteristic tunics, lined up on construction sites under a scorching sun, hauling stone blocks with the help of simple wooden sleds and ropes. They are driven by a near military discipline and a firm conviction that they labor for a sacred cause. Off to the side, Scribes carefully note every delivery, ensuring food rations are distributed fairly and the chief architect's plans are strictly followed. In the background, priests perform prayers and sacrifices to gain the god's favor, without which no stone can be placed successfully. Egyptian art, aside from its aesthetic function, also had a profoundly symbolic role. The frescoes adorning temple and tomb walls depict religious scenes, funerary ceremonies, court life, but also daily activities. All these representations served the purpose of transmitting the political and spiritual messages of the time to posterity, as well as preparing the deceased for the afterlife. The canonical system of proportions, the absence of three-dimensional perspective, and the iconic way of illustrating the human body, head in profile, shoulders front-facing, legs in profile, became part of the visual identity of this civilization. The mythic world of ancient Egypt is populated by a rich pantheon of gods, demigods, and mythological creatures, each representing cosmic forces, aspects of nature, or moral values essential for maintaining order on Earth. Ra, the sun god, was venerated as the main source of life. Isis, symbol of motherhood and healing, was beloved by the people for her compassion. Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, embodied the cycle of vegetation and the hope for an afterlife. Horus, falcon-headed, was the protector of pharaohs and justice, while Seth, the god of storms and chaos, represented the destabilizing elements of the universe. The myth of Osiris and Isis is among the best known and stands at the center of Egyptian religion. It is said that Osiris was killed by his brother Seth, who dismembered his body and scattered it across the land. Isis, his faithful wife and sister, searched for and gathered every part of his body, magically reconstituted it, and briefly restored his life, long enough to conceive a son, Horus. Horus grew up, defeated Seth, and became king of Egypt, thus perpetuating the sacred line of kingship. This story symbolizes the power of love, sacrifice, and hope in rebirth. The afterlife was extremely important to the Egyptians. They believed that the soul, or Ka, remained closely tied to the mummified body. So mummies were prepared with great care and placed in richly adorned sarcophagi. Funerary rites were an elaborate mix of ceremonies meant to ensure a smooth passage into the afterlife. The Book of the Dead, a collection of incantations and magic formulas, guided the deceased through the underworld, helping them overcome obstacles and prove to the goddess Ma'at they were worthy of eternal life. The heart of the departed was weighed on a cosmic scale, and if it was lighter than a feather, the soul could attain everlasting happiness in the fields of Osiris. Besides the established myths, ancient Egypt was shrouded in countless urban legends, popular stories, and local beliefs passed down orally over many generations. These narratives sometimes found expression in the priests' magical practices and in the daily temple rituals. Each region had a principal triad of gods, honored by annual festivals so lavish that priests carried the gods' statues on sacred barks, reenacting the sun's journey across the sky and offering the people a spectacle brimming with emotion and devotion. At the foundation of ancient Egypt's prosperity lay agriculture, sustained by the Nile's annual floods. Every year, when the waters receded, they left a fertile layer of silt on the riverbanks, which ensured bountiful harvests of grain, vegetables, and fruits. The royal administration managed the irrigation canals and stored surplus food in huge granaries to prevent famine in less prosperous years. Trade was also a major factor in Egypt's development. Egyptian ships navigated the Nile far and wide, while caravans crossed the desert to exchange products with distant lands. From Nubia, they brought gold and ebony. From Lebanon, cedar wood. And from eastern territories, incense and exotic spices. The Egyptians exported grain, linen, jewelry, and works of art, establishing important commercial and diplomatic relations with neighboring kingdoms. Daily life in ancient Egypt was vibrant and full of bustle. Open-air markets located on the banks of the Nile buzzed with vendors offering fruit, fresh fish, ceramic vessels, textiles, or decorative items. Ordinary people lived in modest homes built of mud brick, while nobles and wealthy officials could afford spacious residences with peristyles, interior gardens, and even small ponds. Education was the privilege of the elite. Scribes trained in special schools where they mastered the challenging art of hieroglyphic writing. Women enjoyed certain rights that were unusual in other ancient societies. They could own property, initiate divorce, and, in some cases, attain positions of power, as demonstrated by Hatshepsut, who became pharaoh in an era dominated by male rulers. Moreover, religion and ritual traditions occupied a central place in people's lives. Religious festivals, cult ceremonies, and pilgrimages to great temples served as occasions to celebrate and reaffirm collective identity. In addition to achievements in architecture and art, ancient Egypt also represented a hotbed of knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering. The Egyptian calendar, based on the cycle of Nile floods and astronomical observations, later influenced other people's calendar systems. Although their system was not mathematically perfect, it had exceptional practical relevance for organizing agriculture and taxation. Egyptian medicine, though still mixed with magical and ritual elements, made astonishing progress. Surviving medical papyri describe surgical procedures, pharmaceutical recipes, and treatment techniques for various ailments. The Egyptians knew about the effects of certain plants and natural substances, which they employed therapeutically. Mummies unearthed today show evidence of complex surgical interventions, such as fracture repairs and the use of rudimentary prostheses. In engineering, the construction of irrigation canals and dam systems allowed the development of prosperous agriculture on extensive lands. Hydraulic wheels and simple water-lifting technologies like the shaduf, a wooden lever with a counterweight used to draw water from canals, increased agricultural output and protected the population from drought. Likewise, knowledge of metals and minerals led to the development of efficient tools. Knives, chisels, saws, axes, and other instruments fashioned from copper and bronze. These facilitated both agricultural work and large-scale construction projects. Moreover, ancient Egypt became famous for the charm of its gold and semi-precious stone jewelry, crafted with a refinement unmatched in its time. Despite its greatness and constant progress, ancient Egypt passed through multiple periods of crisis and disunity. The first decline arose after the fall of the Old Kingdom, when internal revolts and devastating droughts undermined central authority. Yet the most dramatic change occurred much later, at the end of the New Kingdom and in the subsequent eras. One theory widely accepted by historians underlines the impact of external pressures from neighboring peoples and from invasions in the Mediterranean and the Near East. Nomadic tribal communities joined by migrating groups ravaged Egypt's northern and eastern frontiers, weakening the country's defensive capacity. The Hittites, Assyrians, Babylonians, and finally the Persians all viewed Egypt's riches as an enticing target. By the time of the late period pharaohs, Egypt had gradually lost its sovereignty, first under Persian rule, then under Alexander the Great, and ultimately becoming a Roman province. Another theory considers climatic changes and unusual variations in the Nile's flooding. If the river failed to flood at the right time, or if the volume of water was low, harvests were compromised, leading to famine, rebellions, and political instability. The lack of a diversified economy made Egypt critically dependent on agriculture. When nature became less predictable, the system's resilience drastically diminished. Internal factors such as corruption, rivalries between the priesthood and the monarchy, or power struggles among noble families also contributed to undermining state stability. In certain periods, the priests of Thebes managed to wield significant control over the country, parallel to the pharaoh's power, fragmenting central authority and creating a climate ripe for foreign intervention. Finally, the adoption of foreign cultural and religious elements, especially during the Hellenistic period, after Alexander the Great's conquest, led to a gradual assimilation and the loss of some authentic traditions. Though Hellenistic culture flourished in Alexandria, creating an unprecedented center of learning around the Library of Alexandria and the development of the sciences, the essence of Egyptian traditions faded. Thus, ancient Egypt, as we know it from its golden age, gradually dissolved into the synthesis of Mediterranean civilizations, leaving behind a vast treasure of monuments and writings that continues to fascinate the modern world. Although the pharaoh's power has dimmed, ancient Egypt's heritage endures and has inspired generation after generation. Its colossal monuments, like the pyramids of Giza or the temples of Luxor and Karnak, still draw tourists from every corner of the globe. Researchers continue to decipher hieroglyphs, analyzing administrative, religious, and literary texts to better understand the Egyptians' worldview and their concepts of life. Additionally, their methods of mummification and advanced surgical techniques demonstrate a remarkable level of medical knowledge for that era. Egypt's religion, with its rich pantheon and complex rituals, influenced the development of religious concepts in the Mediterranean sphere and beyond, drawing parallels with other Oriental mythologies and contributing to the enrichment of Hellenistic syncretism. The reverence for the goddess Isis, for instance, spread as far as Rome and throughout the Roman Empire, featuring dedicated temples and communities of passionate devotees. Egyptian artistic creations, mural paintings, colossal statues, as well as delicate jewelry and cult objects, influenced the aesthetics of later periods. During Europe's neoclassical era, Egyptian motifs and forms were reinterpreted in paintings, sculptures, and architecture, generating an artistic trend known as Egyptomania. Even today, designers and fashion creators draw inspiration from hieroglyphic motifs, from the colors and symbolism of ancient Egypt, bringing a mysterious, sophisticated air to their collections. The importance of studying ancient Egypt lies in the fact that it gives us insights into the potential of human civilization. Through cooperation, administrative organization, and a long-term vision, the ancient Egyptians built a state that lasted for millennia. They showed how religion and mythology can serve as cohesive factors, maintaining unity and motivating people to work together on grand projects. The history of ancient Egypt also raises questions about how we manage natural resources, about balancing political power with responsibility toward the community, and about the fragility of even the most brilliant empires in the face of nature's forces and their own internal contradictions. As the sun sets over the Nile, its light shifts through a spectacle of orange and gold hues. The silhouettes of temples and pyramids, once animated by priests, laborers, and pharaohs, now stand motionless, guarding the timeless hush of the desert. Yet the stones still speak, conveying a powerful message to those willing to listen. Humanity's greatest achievements are made possible through vision, determination, and faith in a shared ideal. The ancient Egyptians had the courage to confront the Nile's waters and subdue the desert, transforming it into fertile land. They revered cosmic forces and erected an entire spiritual universe to explain their place before eternity. Throughout the trials of history, and despite the hardships and wars that shook them, they left behind a universal treasury of knowledge, art, and spirituality that continues to inspire us. Perhaps their pyramids and temples are now tourist sites or open-air museums, but the soul of ancient Egypt lives on through the legends and myths that captivate our imaginations, through manuscripts retrieved from the darkness of time, and through every archaeological discovery that brings another fragment of truth about this civilization to light. Every traveler who follows in their footsteps along the Nile's banks feels the thrill of an ancestral call, as though echoes of their grand epic resonate with our own searches for identity. Like a vessel sailing the Nile's tranquil waters at evening, this documentary draws to a close. But your journey, dear viewers, does not end here. The history of ancient Egypt is an inexhaustible source of mysteries and revelations. Each ruin, each hieroglyph, each myth conceals a key to a profound understanding of human destiny. Moreover, it shows how, through solidarity and creative imagination, people were able to raise monuments that challenge not only nature's forces, but also the ravages of time. The ancient Egyptians speak to us today of the power of faith and limitless ambition, of a bold vision that translates sacredness into architecture and grants life and death equal importance as two parts of the same timeline. Their story urges us to reflect on our own civilizations and on the legacy we will leave for future generations. Will we prove as grand in our intentions and as wise in resource management? Will we rise to the heights of our own ideals? The questions remain open, and the answers may lie in the sand still hiding undiscovered treasures, in hieroglyphic inscriptions that still hold secrets, and in our boundless thirst for knowledge. The journey through ancient Egypt is not only a voyage into the past, but also a challenge for the future. To follow the example of those who, with modest means but an indomitable spirit, managed to fulfill their dreams and materialize their beliefs in tangible, enduring monuments. So once the lights go out and the echo of the final sacred drums fades into silence, keep your hearts and minds open. The story of ancient Egypt truly never ends. It is a call for exploration and reflection, a song across time that unites all of us in one grand adventure, the adventure of self-knowledge and of understanding our place in this vast yet fragile world. We thank you for joining us on this monumental voyage among the pyramids and temples of ancient Egypt, in the lofty heights of pharaonic palaces, and in the soul of a people who understood, thousands of years ago, what it means to dream of immortality. Keep your eyes fixed on the horizon, for there are still countless treasures to discover and lessons to be learned. Like the Nile itself, history follows its course, and we're invited to join in, to let ourselves be carried by the currents, and to write new chapters in the endless book of humanity. This is the covenant left to us by the ancient Egyptians, never to cease marveling at the grandeur of life, and to carry within our hearts the hope that with each new sunrise, we may find the strength and wisdom to surpass our limits and build our own monuments, whether of stone or of spirit, within the universal chronicle of humankind.